Y'all, let's try this again. I believe, since my router didn't go down, that Facebook shut that one down. So, live stream ended abruptly. So, and usually it's that three-letter company that has a router here that shut it down. This one I think was Facebook. I'm not sure why, but things are changing all the time. So we're gonna keep going. So we're talking about fructose, and we're talking about sugar, and we're talking about changes in dietary modifications and recommendations from the USDA and the FDA and the food pyramid, and how that might actually be all over bad for you compared to compared to a high-fat, low-carb diet. So the low-fat diet has not done anything for heart disease. It's still the number one killer in the United States. So we were at soft drinks. So 41% increase in consumption of soft drinks among children, 1994 to 1995. So the recommendations for low fat and higher carbohydrate diets went into effect 1980 after a committee led by George McGovern started making those recommendations. Hey, Wendy, part two. I guess we are going to do part two. I still don't know if this is, I don't think it was my router going down. I think Facebook just ended it. So maybe maybe a certain CEO of Facebook is irritated by what I'm talking about. Who knows? Okay, so I was telling you, one can of soda at 150 calories. If you drank one for 1 year, 365 days, and there's 3,500 calories per pound, you would expect to gain 15.5 pounds just from soda. So there's a lot of people. I talked to a woman 2-3 weeks ago. She lost 20 pounds just by eliminating soda pop, soft drinks from her diet, and that included diet ones. So the diet ones I talked about 4 or 5 months ago is actually being worse for your health than the sugary ones. But I'm going to basically prove to you over the next two classes why fructose is really high fat. So if you believe that high fat leads to heart disease, I'm going to prove biochemically why fructose is really high fat. So a certain company that goes by the initial CC in 1915, so this is the difference in soft drinks. In 1915, a single serving bottle of that soda pop was 6.5 ounces. So if you drank one of those a year, you would expect to gain 8.9 pounds. In 1992, the 20-ounce bottle variety came out, and before that there was the 8. So McDonald's had an 8-ounce soft drink. That was their, I think, biggest one back when I was a younger person. So the 12-ounce bottle of soda that you see in convenience stores is actually 2.5 servings of that soft drink if you consider a serving 8 ounces. So if you drank one of those a year, you would expect to gain 26 pounds just from that. And then 7-Eleven, I think in 1988, came out with a Big Gulp, which is 44 ounces of a soft drink, soda pop. And one of those a day, you would expect to gain 57 pounds in 1 year. Okay? So what's in soda? Well, one is, caffeine is in there. Well, what's caffeine? Well, it's in coffee. It's a little jolt, so it's a little stimulant. It's not a huge stimulant like, phentermine, Adderall, cocaine, all that, but it's a little bit stimulating. And it's also a diuretic. The other thing that's so diuretic, if you urinate more, so you're drinking soda and you're urinating more, so that makes you more thirsty, correct? So these beverage companies know all this biochemistry and the science behind what motivates you to drink more and eat more, so they're going to sell you more. Also within a soda pop is salt. There's about 55 milligrams of sodium in one can. So basically what Dr. Lustig says is drinking a soda pop is like eating a pizza. So you wouldn't eat 2 or 3 pizzas a day, but a lot of people will drink 2 or 3 cans of soda a day. Remember I think it was Hugh Hefner drank Pepsi, so I'm picking on one particular company. Hugh Hefner drank, I think, a case of Pepsi a day. Now how he stayed thin, I don't know. So salt is in there. So a diuretic makes you thirstier, and sugar is added, and specifically high fructose corn syrup is added to hide the taste of salt. Okay, so I have been known to put peanuts, salted peanuts, in a bottle of soda and drink it because it's wonderful. So I'm not sure why salt in the taste is a bad thing, but for some people that would not be something they wanted. If you remember New Coke from the 80s, I think it was, they added more salt and more sugar and had a backlash. It didn't have the same formula. And that the formula for that particular brand is only known, I think, by 2 people at any one time. So nobody really quite knows the formula of that particular soda. Okay, so from 2003, studies in the soft drink industry, they made this statement: there is no association between sugar consumption and obesity. Well, that really doesn't make any sense, right? So in 2001, a prospective study was done where they looked at an additional sugar in sweetened drinks over a 19-month period. And so BMI went up by 0.24 during that study. And that's based on square meters, so surface area, weight per square meter. And the odds ratio for obesity using a sweetened drink over 19 months raised the obesity risk by 1.6. So 1.0 would be no change. 1.6, this was in teenagers. So not theoretically, they showed that BMI and weight and obesity rates went up, almost doubled. So 1.6. So 1.5, a little bit, about 1.5 times higher rate of obesity from sugar-laden soft drinks. Okay, what about soft drinks and type 2 diabetes? There is a statistically significant increased risk of type 2 diabetes just from soft drinks. Okay, so what they're saying is soft drinks containing high fructose corn syrup, we are now consuming about 60 pounds of fructose a year, most of it in soft drinks and beverages and fruit juice. Okay? Prior to 1975, nobody had been exposed to fructose. It was developed by a corn company here in collaboration with Japan. And fructose is sweeter than sugar. So table sugar is sucrose. Fructose, so that's glucose plus fructose. Fructose is cheaper and it's sweeter. So it's less expensive to produce fructose. So sugar is a disaccharide, so it's 2 sugar molecules together. So that's glucose and fructose. Okay, and then fructose is a monosaccharide. And they are metabolized, let me see what I said, absorbed equally into the body using sucrose, so they're absorbed equally. So sweeter and less expensive. They have the same effects on feeling full, satiety. Okay, and then studies done by corn refiners that produce fructose show that producing fructose is cheaper than producing table sugar. Okay, so it appears that the excess consumption of sugar can lead to a myriad of health problems, not only which is obesity and type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. So this physician made the statement, fructose is poison. And then we're going to prove that to you, especially with the biochemistry on Friday. I also heard a physician in 2015, his take on it was he spent an hour talking about sugar. Sugar is poison. So this guy's take is he's focused on fructose. Okay? So can you get natural fructose? Sure. So fructose is found in honey, it's found in tree and vine fruits, and most root vegetables. Okay? But it's commercially derived from sugarcane and beets and maize, corn. Okay? So the trend in fructose consumption over the past 100 years, so think back to about 1915 to 20, the intake of fructose was basically natural fruits and vegetables. That soda pop company was around, but it had a 6.5 ounce bottle in 1915, and people weren't that, I guess, addicted to those soft drinks. So 15 grams per day of fructose from natural fruits and vegetables. And then prior to World War II, with the advent of soda pop and all that, went up to 16 to 24 grams a day. This is about fructose, not sugar. Okay. In 1978, fructose consumption was 37 grams a day. So since fructose is a monosaccharide, if you want to talk about sugar, you just double the numbers, because sucrose is a disaccharide. All right. In 1994, 54.7 grams per day. In 2008, this is in teenagers, 72.8 grams of fructose a day, mainly in soda pop and fruit juice and sports drinks. 25% of teenagers were consuming 15% of their calories just from fructose. Okay, so it was first made and marketed in the early 1970s, released to market about 1975. And so corn syrup is processed. And when we talk about processed food, that's what we're talking about. So sucrose, so glucose and fructose are called isomers. They have the same chemical structure, but they're a little bit different in how they're bonded. So there is an enzyme that can be used to isomerase glucose to fructose. So some of the glucose was isomerized to fructose because it's cheaper than having to make sugar, which is a combination of glucose and fructose. So we're not eating more, we're just eating more sugar. And that's going back to about 1980, so 40 years. So again, you double the number of grams of intake because table sugar is a disaccharide. We're kind of focused on fructose because the thing I put up was a skull and crossbones on what looked like table sugar, basically. Okay. Okay. So here's the politics. In 1972, when Nixon was running for president, there was a lot of food price rises, specifically sugar, that was going up and down, up and down, up and down. And so Nixon was worried that the food price elevation would keep him from being reelected. So he did this war on poverty. So if anybody remembers or was alive when Nixon was president, he did have a war on poverty. And the war on poverty was to de-escalate prices of food, specifically for inner city people that lived in inner cities that were at the poverty level. Okay, and his statement was food should never be an issue in a presidential election. Okay, so in 1975, Japan introduced high fructose corn syrup to the food market, and that stabilized sugar prices. Okay, it is so high fructose corn syrup is half the price to produce compared to sugar. And so it's so cheap to make, it's basically found its way into almost all processed foods. Like I said in the first part before I got shut down, you would have a hard time picking up a box of food and reading the label and not finding high fructose corn syrup on the label. However, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, they were allowed to change the nomenclature, the naming of it, and now they call it natural sugar. So if you see natural sugar on a food label, it's almost always high fructose corn syrup. It is a natural sugar, it's just bad for you. It's poison. Okay? So look at bread. Dr. Lustwig mentions a person that went to the supermarket and picked up 32 different loaves of bread, different manufacturers, and every one but one had high fructose corn syrup in the bread. So it's in your hamburger buns, it's in bread, it's in almost everything that's boxed or in a package. Okay? The other issue is women, infants, children. So the WIC program. That was set up under President Nixon, and that was to avoid failure to thrive in poverty-level children, specifically in inner cities. And so basically, their incentive was fruit juices. So it's fructose is in fruit, so fruit juice sounds like a good idea, except they throw a bunch of high fructose corn syrup in it. So the children of WIC are being provided their fruit juice and lots of fructose from women, infants, and children. We'll talk later, I think Friday, about formula. Okay, what's in formula? Okay, so in 1970, we'll talk about pounds of sugar. 1970, sugar consumption was 73 pounds per person per year. By 2009, sugar consumption was at 141 pounds of sugar per person per year. And the latest one I found from the NIH is 152 pounds of sugar per person per year. So what's changed is we're not eating more, we're eating more, well, we are eating more, but we're eating more sugar. Okay? And that was from George McGovern, 1978 Committee on Food, 1980 USDA recommendations, and the Food Pyramid of 1992. Okay, so think about the names for sugar. So when you look at labels, you look for sugar, glucose, honey, sorghum syrup, lactose, which is in dairy products, and is not a bad sugar actually, just doesn't taste sweet. Fruit juice, high fructose corn syrup, brown sugar, dextrose, fructose, corn syrup, sorbitol, molasses, maltose, corn sweetener, sucrose, and syrup. So sugar and sucrose are the same thing. Okay, so what is added sugar? Okay, so you already got some sugar naturally, right? So what's added sugar? So soft drinks, 33% added sugar. So where do you get your sugar from? So soft drinks, 33% of the U.S. diets for sugar intake is from soft drinks. Okay? Table sugar, about 25%, so people don't like sugar in their coffee and tea. Baked goods, about 14% of American diet. Fruit drinks, 10%. Dairy desserts, about 6%. Candy, about 5%. Breakfast cereal, about 4%. And then tea, 3%, presumably with people that sugar their tea. So most of the dietary sugar intake is from table sugar and soft drinks. And then you add the fruit juices, so you're at 33 plus 25, so that's 50. 8 plus 10, that's 68% of sugar intake is just from soft drinks, table sugar, and fruit juices that are added sugar. Okay, so 1982, the American Heart Association, the AMA, the USDA calls for the United States to decrease fat intake. How come? Well, we talked about this in May when we talked about Ansel Keys' 7-country study. So in the early 1970s, LDL was discovered and running around in our bloodstream. So the low density lipoprotein, it's not cholesterol, it's a taxi for cholesterol. LDL, in the mid-1970s, it was found that dietary fat consumption increased low density lipoprotein levels. And then in the late 1970s, LDL elevation was correlated with cardiovascular disease. So the thinking was if you decrease fat intake, So they're jumping logically over two things that are maybe not, you can't just do that. So if you lower your fat intake, it would lower cardiovascular disease. Well, we've done that. What we've switched to is carbohydrates and more sugar. Heart disease rates, still there. Mortality from heart disease, still number one. Okay? There's a book in 1972 that predicted all this, and it's by a guy named John Yedkin. The name of it is Pure, White, and Deadly. It was about sugar, and basically he was predicting what was getting ready to happen and has happened. Okay, the Ansel Keys study was 1980, made front page news, and basically he was saying that increased saturated fat increases coronary heart disease based on those 7 studies. If you look at his data and his graph, though, Japan and Italy didn't really have a huge rise in cardiovascular disease. So the United States was highest in his looking at 7 countries. Japan and Italy were the lowest. Well, Asian people eat a lot of rice, carbs. Italians eat a lot of pasta, carbs. What they don't do is eat a lot of sugar. Okay, so they moderate their sugar intake. So they're eating carbs, so Japan and Italy eats lots of carbs, and they don't have huge rates of cardiovascular disease compared to the U.S. But they don't eat sugar that much. A little bit here and there, but they really don't eat sugar that much. Okay? So the lower fat recommendations from the USDA in 1982 came from the Ansel Keys studies published in 1980, and he had started looking at that, I think, in the 1960s. He refuted all of the stuff that he said and concluded before he died. I think he was 100 years old when he died. But he gave an interview, I want to say a year or two before he died, saying, well, we knew sugar was the problem, but we were focused on fat. So he basically refuted his own work. So it is reasonably established that increased LDL, sort of. If you listen to me in May, I kind of give you the truth on LDL as you get older. So as you get older, you actually need a higher cholesterol and LDL taxi. So if your cholesterol goes up, you need more taxi, right? So increases with coronary heart disease, right? But there's 2 kinds of LDL. And we started doing this 7 or 8 years ago in Oklahoma City when I was in practice. I didn't care what your LDL level was, and still don't. I want to know what your ratios are, and I want to know the particle size. Because there's really 3 different kinds of LDL, 2 mainly. So LDL-A is a light and buoyant LDL, low density lipoprotein. It's a large particle. It does not worm its way under the lining of your blood vessels and start making plaque. The one that does, and remember, the plaque starts because of inflammation. It's not cholesterol and LDL and all that, it's inflammation. So that's LDL type A, particle A. LDL particle B is the problem. So it's small, it's dense, it doesn't float, and it wiggles its way under the endothelial cell layer of a blood vessel and starts forming plaque in the face of inflammation. So when you get a total LDL level, because they don't measure them separately unless you ask them to, and most doctors don't do that, you get a total LDL. What you don't know is which kind. Well, there is a way to measure that. Okay, so you can measure LDL-A and LDL-B. We used to call that, I'm trying to think, it was a 20-test lipid profile. They don't do it anymore. It used to be a profile, and you would get the particle size and the inflammatory stuff and all that, plus the total cholesterol, total LDL, apolipoprotein B. But now you have to order them separately. So why that became not a panel anymore, I can't tell you. Okay, so total LDL levels, again, don't tell you which kind of LDL that you have, so you measure the particle size. But another way of looking at it is triglycerides and HDL.
So if you are carrying, the triglyceride and HDL levels kind of tell you if you have more LDLA, the safer kind, than LDLB. So LDLA has a lower triglyceride level and a higher HDL level. And as you start carrying more LDLB, the more problematic one, your triglycerides go up and your HDL goes down. So LDL levels compared to triglyceride to HDL ratio, so triglyceride to high density lipoprotein ratios, are actually more predictive of coronary heart disease than LDL levels. So if your doctor is, and the other one is cholesterol, total cholesterol to HDL levels. So you want that under 5. So I talk to a lot of people that, their doctor's trying to put them on a statin, or they've been on a statin, and I look at their ratios and I go, well, your ratio is fine. You want to be under 5. And I've got people that their doctor's trying to talk them into statin because their cholesterol's 202 and their LDL's 110, and they want to put them on a statin. I go, yeah, but your HDL is 65, good level, triglycerides are low, and your ratios are completely normal. No increased risk of heart disease. So you've got to really look at it. So a low carbohydrate, high fat diet will raise your LDL type A levels. Your LDLA, the good kind, I don't want to say good or bad, the more safe kind. And then a high carbohydrate diet with low fat raises LDLB, the problematic one. Okay? So to make low-fat food, which can taste like cardboard, I told you the Dean Ornish spaghetti and meatballs tasted like shoestrings and pencil erasers. In order to make that type of food palatable, food companies process in sugar and carbohydrates. Makes them edible. Because a true low-fat with no carb diet in it, tastes like you're eating cardboard. Nobody really wants to do that. If you haven't tried Dean Ornish food, give it a shot. You'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. So basically, what the food industry has done is contaminate and adulterate our food supply by putting poison fructose and sugar in it, just because it tastes good. Okay, and it does taste good. Everybody knows that. So fructose, really, you're trying to get the taste. It also helps with browning. So think about, he talks about cooking a steak on the grill. If there's fructose, it browns the steak. Well, and he says the same thing happens in your artery. So you really want to charbroil your coronary arteries, right? But that's basically what fructose does. It's a browning agent and it tastes good. Okay, so removal of fiber was taken out of the U.S. recommended diet, and that was in order to improve shelf life and be able to freeze things and cook them fast. Okay, so it was a substitution. So we substituted trans fats for a hardening agent and for shelf life as well. And those have been removed. So you hear, don't eat trans fats. So that's been happening. McDonald's French fries were cooked in trans fats and they were wonderful, but not so good for you. So they changed all that. Okay. So fiber consumption, if you go back to the 50,000 years ago when people were scavenging plants and roots and all that kind of stuff, fiber consumption was 100 to 300 grams per day. Okay, and now 2020, our fiber consumption is 12. So 100 to 300, now down to 12 grams per day of fiber. Okay, so fiber is used in fast food. When you hear about fast food, it's not cholesterol. It's the fact there's no fiber in it and there's a bunch of fructose in it. And that helps freeze it fast, and then you can cook it fast, then it's fast food, right? So fructose is not glucose. And so what we're going to do Friday, and so everybody, fructose and glucose have a different mechanism of metabolism. So when we convene Friday, because I'm right at 29 minutes, part 2, we're going to talk about the biochemistry of alcohol, fructose, glucose, fiber, all that. I'll try to make it not boring.
and we'll talk a little bit more about proving that fructose and high fructose corn syrup is killing you. Okay? So, have a great day. It's a very nice day here. I've got to give exams this week. I gave 2 yesterday. I got to give 3 tomorrow. Or no, 3. I give 5 exams this week. So I'm busy at the college. I will talk to you Friday morning at 9:30. Peace and love. Have a great day, and I'll see you later. Bye.